As the next program this evening is to be shown in 5 days' time in the United States, I'd like to say a brief hello to our viewers across the Atlantic. Tonight we begin a series of 3 programs entitled An American Looks at Science in Britain. These are the first British programs to be recorded and shown in the United States. To mark the occasion, the American ambassador has kindly agreed to say a few words by way of introduction. His Excellency, Mr. Walter Gifford.
I'm very happy to be here on this occasion, the occasion on which television programs are being produced for the first time by showing both in the United States and Great Britain. As an American, I know that in the United States, our people are fairly well informed and very proud of what they have achieved in scientific endeavor. However, I also know that they have very little awareness on the whole of what has been achieved and accomplished here in Great Britain. For a better understanding, this project of the Johns Hopkins Scientific Review is going to be of great help.
Mr. Lynn Poole of the Johns Hopkins University arrived by air with his wife last week, and he was interviewed at the airport by his producer in this country, Andrew Miller Jones.
Well, Mr. Poole, we are delighted to welcome you to England to take part in this Anglo-American television program project. Well, thank you, Mr. Miller-Jones. It's awfully nice to be here. We've been looking forward to it for a long time. Well, sir, we too, and I'm sure that viewers in England and in America too, would be very glad to hear what you are expecting from this collaboration. Well, we're expecting a great deal from this project. In the first place, we hope that it will add its small bit to this great tradition of happy Anglo-American relationship that we've had for so many generations. Also, I hope that it will give us an opportunity to show our people in America some of the great things that are going on in the scientific world in England. Well, I hope they won't be disappointed. I'm sure they won't. My name is Lynn Poole, and I am here in the BBC studios in London. At the moment, between me and the screen in your home, there's a lot of very complicated apparatus, which is worked by a large team of engineers and program staff. Each has his appointed job to do before you can see me here in this studio. Now, in charge of all this activity is the producer of the program. He gives the word and sets things in motion.
Quiet, please. Stand by. Quiet, studio. Stand by.
Now, that order was relayed to the studio by the studio manager. The camera is approaching me, and I'm looking it full in the face. But even then, before my picture reaches you, the engineers have to adjust the controls in the apparatus room. They must do this to be sure that the picture has good quality. And when they're satisfied, the picture comes to the transmitter. There, it is finally adjusted and boosted up before it is sent out through the aerial. Now, this aerial was erected on one of the towers of Alexandra Palace in London in 1936. And the top of the aerial is 600 feet above sea level. And in this manner, the picture of me is sent out to the people in the south of England. And now that you can see me face to face, may I say good evening and tell you how very happy and honored I am to be taking part in this Anglo-American project. Now, you have seen how the picture leaves this studio and reaches the audience in the south of England. Perhaps you'd like to see the studio in which I work in the United States. This is station WAAM, which is situated on a high hill in Baltimore, Maryland. And now, let's go inside the studio and see how we present one of our typical Johns Hopkins Science Review, which reaches 23 cities over the DuMont network in America. And with this brief introduction, let's return to television in Great Britain. We selected this program tonight because we wanted to show you, both here and in America, something of the story of BBC television. You've seen the aerial in this transmitter on Alexandra Palace. Now this serves the southern part of the country and reaches 12 millions of the population. Now in England, the stations are more powerful and they serve a larger area than do our stations in America. Now at the same time that this signal is transmitted at Alexandra Palace, the signal is taken by coaxial cable to Birmingham, which is 110 miles to the north. Now these signals are then radiated by a transmitter at Sutton Coldfield. This area serves 7 3/4 millions of the population. Sutton Coldfield, by the way, is another powerful transmitting station. And for those who are interested, the input of this aerial is 45 kilowatts. Sutton Coldfield was opened on December 17th, 1949, and marked the first stage in the making of a nationwide network here in Great Britain. From Sutton Coldfield, coaxial cable takes the signal to Holme Moss, about 200 miles north of London. This transmitter serves an industrial area in which 11 million people live. Now, at the moment, Holme Moss is the most powerful television transmitter in the world. And the day after I arrived in England, I was fortunate enough to go to Huddersfield in Yorkshire and have a look at Holme Moss. Now, I can assure you that it was one of the most exciting experiences of my life. And when I say exciting, you can see what I mean in just a moment. The transmitting station is situated on the bleak Yorkshire moors, 700 feet above sea level. Now, I went up myself to this rugged site and was overcome by an urge to climb this mast. So I was given a flying suit, which you see here, loaned to me by Mr. Buckle, the engineer in charge, and started my ascent up the first ladder. As I reached the first level, I got on a very thin little ladder, which was almost like a lattice. And the higher I climbed, I could look down and see the station below. The station below is spread out over these Yorkshire moors. One can see a great distance. Remember, this mast is 750 feet high. Here, the television signal is transmitted over miles and miles of territory. One looks down here on this little station, which is a most important station in the transmission of television for Great Britain. Now, a radio link carries the signal from Holme Moss to Kirkoshots, which is situated 400 miles north of London, midway between Edinburgh and Glasgow, Scotland. This makes television available to some 4 million people who live north of the border. Now, here we are at Kirkoshots. It was opened on medium power on the 14th of March, 1952, and ultimately, its transmission strength will be 5 kilowatts larger and higher than the Holme Moss, situated near Huddersfield. Now, the distances involved in television in Great Britain and America are vastly different. We at home are used to a television network that stretches over thousands of miles. For example, you'll remember only a few days ago that the explosion of the atomic bomb on the desert in Nevada was televised to millions of people living 3,000 miles apart. But there is one essential difference between transmission over area here in Great Britain and that in America. The difference is that the stations here are more powerful. Those of you in America know that our networks are made up of 40 to 50 different stations, but each station is less powerful than the ones that I've shown you here tonight, because each station in America covers only a radius of perhaps 50 to 60 miles. Well, in Great Britain, it's very much, television is very much like the daily newspapers. They're national in scope. Well, so much for the electronic distribution of television. How did it all begin? It began in America and it began in England. And in America, I think we consider the pioneers of television to be Dr. Vladimir Zworykin and Dr. Alan B. DuMont, where here in England, I think Logie Baird is accepted popularly as perhaps the father of television, but Baird is also well known in America. As a matter of fact, here is Dr. Baird at work in his laboratory. Now, if it had not been for Baird, for his single-minded belief in television, the public service would not have been started in England in 1936. Perhaps I should tell some of you and remind others that Dr. Baird developed the 30-line system, and his original apparatus has been put into work at this very moment for the television conference convention which is being held at the Institute of Electrical Engineering here in London. Now, the Institute is situated just under the shadow of St. Paul's Cathedral on the embankment of the Thames. And we have sent an outside broadcast unit, or as we say in America, a remote broadcast unit, into the lecture hall in order to show you this historical piece of apparatus at work. Now, it will be described by Mr. Bridgewater, one of Baird's youthful associates, a man who is now a senior BBC engineer. Good evening, Mr. Bridgewater. Can you hear me?
Good evening, Mr. Poole. Yes, I can hear you very well.
Well, it's nice to talk to you, and how about putting this famous museum piece through its paces?
Certainly, I'll try. Well, behind me is the original camera projector which was used by the BBC in 1932, having been made for that purpose by the Baird Television Company. And it remained in use for 3 years, giving experimental programs. Now, just to have a closer look, I will remove this side cover. And here you see the arc lamp, which provides the source of light. The light passes through a tiny aperture just in this metal disc below my finger here, probably a little too small for you to see. And then a thin, narrow ray goes through this part of the projector, through a lens and onto a mirror, and then onto this mirror drum, and thence onto the screen or the scene being televised. Now, this drum is interesting. It contains 30 mirrors round its periphery, each one slightly displaced with respect to the other, and it is this which builds up the scanning process. I think you may see the surfaces of this a little more clearly if we swing round this projector now. There you see the different facets and the reflections. Well, now, if we turn the projector back onto the screen, you will see the spot of light and the scanning process, I think, quite clearly. The spot moves up in adjacent paths as each mirror reflects it onto a different position of the screen. There it goes. But of course the whole process is greatly speeded up in operation. That will be done in a moment. Now, the light reflected from the scene, from this spot as it scans the scene, is picked up by photoelectric cells in those 2 boxes which you can see on either side of the screen. From those photoelectric cells flow small currents or signals which ultimately can be broadcast to the home viewer. Well, so much for the camera for the moment. Let us now go and look at a typical old home receiver. Now, this 30-line receiver was put on the market in 1933. You will see that it has a screen here, and it is of the projection type of set, not uncommon even to this day. The picture, you will notice, is a rather odd shape. It is long and narrow in the vertical direction. Well, now turning to the side of the set, which has been uncovered for our inspection, you don't find, as in a modern receiver, a cathode ray tube, but instead there is a small vent inside this box here, which sends light through a little device called a car cell. Now that provides the light and shade controlled by the incoming signal necessary for the picture, which is built up again by the light being reflected onto another mirror drum, which I dare say you can see rotating in here, and then reflecting the light onto the screen. This drum goes, of course, at the same speed as the one in the projector which we've just been looking at. So now let us try to bring together the old and the new. This old 30-line receiver and this modern outside broadcast camera, one of our latest types, which is going to try to pick up pictures, if we can coax them from this ancient receiver. You see the cameraman just pressed the button and that had rotated electrically the lens turret, and he's brought into position the correct lens. So now as the lights go down and we prepare to tune in and attempt this experiment, we will first of all show you our subject as he is being televised, and then later we hope to show you the reception. We're just adjusting the receiver. You see the picture slipping by, but that can be corrected, I think. Yes, stationary now. This is the actual reception. You caught a glimpse of him just now being transmitted there. That is the transmitting end now, as you see. And now if we go back again, you'll see the 30-line reception.
Well, Mr. Bridgewater, we certainly thank you for this demonstration, and I would like to say that I recognize the gentleman that you've televised. It's a countryman of mine, Mr. Axel Jensen, who is attending your convention there, and I'd like to thank you both for your cooperation. I think there is no doubt that John Logie Baird was really a pioneer in television. But whether the Americans or John Logie Baird were the first in the field, TV, as it is practiced today, was certainly given a great signpost and a go-ahead by Campbell Swinton, here in England, who published a letter in Nature magazine in 1908. And if you don't mind, I would like to read you a paragraph from that letter. Campbell Swinton wrote, "The problem of obtaining distant electric vision can probably be solved by the employment of two beams of cathode rays, one at the transmitting and one at the receiving station, synchronously deflected by the varying fields of two electromagnets." Well, now in 1912, Campbell Swinton showed in his presidential address to the Renton Society that he showed them a circuit. And this circuit is basically the same, bears a remarkable resemblance to the type of television that we use today. Now, I won't explain it to you, except to say that it bears this remarkable resemblance to the type of thing that we are used to today. I thought it might interest you to see it. But everyone was working at the same time. Many people on both sides of the Atlantic were researching in their laboratories and were theorizing about television. But it was Vladimir Zworykin in the United States who produced a electronic television tube in 1931. But very shortly thereafterwards, another tube was produced in England by Dr. James McGee. This tube was produced in 1932. And it's our privilege and pleasure to have Dr. McGee with us tonight. Dr. McGee, I would like to take this tube from you for a moment and show it to our viewers, because I want them to get a very good look at this remarkable thing that you did.
Pleasure, Mr. O'Toole.
I want you to have a good look at it. Oh, perhaps we should put it over here on the corner of the desk and ask Dr. McGee to tell us a little bit more about this tube.
We'll turn it round this way so as the viewers can get a better view of the tube. This is really now quite a historic museum piece, as it goes back to 1932. At that time, a colleague, Mr. Teddem, and I were working on the electronic tubes for television, and which you have been just describing. And we were very impressed by the suggestions that he had made. And so we set out to try and repeat those, experiments in practice.
And this is a sample of one of the first tubes that you made.
This is a sample of the first tube that actually gave a television picture by electronic beams.
Well, I wonder, Dr. McGee, if you would show us this one also. I believe this is the tube that Dr. Zworykin produced just about the same time as yours.
This is a tube made just about a year earlier by Dr. Zworykin, and it was the first to give a television picture by this means in the United States.
Well, I'm sure they both worked very well, but this tube is one that I'm very interested in your showing.
These tubes were very crude in their beginnings, and they have led eventually to this modern tube, which is used in these cameras as which are transmitting this picture to the viewers at home.
Well, we're all very grateful to you for your fine work, and I think that everyone will be most interested in having had the opportunity of seeing these really historic pieces and seeing Dr. McGee, who did so much of the early work. But what about television in Great Britain before the war? Well, there was a lot of television here at that time, and you might be interested to know that the first service programs that went on the air were in 1936. Now, these were no mere experiments. The programs were being broadcast to the homes and the receiving sets here in England at that time. Now, during the past week, I have had the opportunity of seeing a number of the recordings of these pre-war programs, and I asked whether I could show some of them to you tonight. But before we do, I would like to tell you that the voice you will hear describing these programs is the voice of Miss Sylvia Peters, whom you saw opening our program tonight. And the young lady who will dance at the close of this film is none other than Margot Fonteyn, who is very well known in America, but at the time that she was on this television broadcast, she was very little known in her own country.
The station was ready to transmit its first official program. A mighty wave of mystic magic rays is all about us in the blue. The first outside broadcast in the world was that of the coronation procession on the 12th of May, 1937. Feature of pre-war outside broadcasts was the transmission of stage shows from the West End theatres, such as the Coliseum and the Victoria Palace.
Now remember, these programs were being produced here in 1936. And during the past week, I have noticed many similarities and differences between television in Great Britain and in America. One difference that I noticed immediately was that the announcer appeared in flesh, in vision, at the beginning of the program. Another thing, most of these announcers, the majority of them, are women. And before the war, there were 2 women announcers here in Great Britain, and I would like you to meet one of them tonight. It's a privilege to have her with us, Miss Janet Bly.
Good evening,
Hi,
Mr.
how are you?
Liverpool.
Nice to see you, and won't you sit down?
It's very nice to be here, and I would like to take this opportunity of saying good evening to the viewers both in England and in the United States of America.
I'm sure they will be all glad that you had the chance to be here with us too, Miss Bly, but I wanted to ask you this. You've been in television almost from the beginning, in and out of it. Tell us something of your experiences, your feelings about television.
Well, I was an announcer for about 3.5 years before the war, from 1936 onwards, and as well as doing ordinary announcing, I used to do a lot of stunts for television, a lot of outside broadcasts.
Well, what do you mean by stunts?
Well, I was rescued by a fireman in a firefighting demonstration, and I did trick riding on a motor bicycle, and then I took a microphone up in an autogyro, which was televised in the
Mercy.
exhibition, And I used to be known as the pearl white of television.
Well, I know that our American viewers will know exactly what you mean when you say we're the pearl white, because she really went through perils, didn't she?
Well, I had a great deal of fun doing it.
I'm sure you did. Well, may I ask you rather a personal question? Here in Great Britain, as a woman, do you find that you have equal opportunity and equal position with men in television?
Yes, I think very definitely women have a very equal position. In fact, I think they're almost on top in television because there are more women announcers than men at the moment.
Well, I'm sure that there are many of them on top, and I judge that you would say it's a good profession for women.
Well, I can't give you an absolutely unbiased opinion because television is my first love and always was, but I think it's a very good profession for any girl to take up.
I'm sure it is, and I'm also sure that there are many men at home in America watching this program who are going to write to their stations and to the network and say, please give us some very pretty women announcers. Well, Miss Bly was working in television here as it went along, but television closed down in 1939. The stations closed for fear that enemy airmen would use their beacons to follow a way home into England for destruction. But after the war, television opened immediately in 1946, and Miss Bly was on hand to help open television. Television has really gone ahead very swiftly in England, and in 1949, the Lime Grove Studios were opened. These studios had formerly belonged to the DuMont British Film Corporation. Here are 5 tremendous studios, and one of them we are speaking to you tonight. Now, England has great plans for television. Things are going to move ahead, and they have many hopes. Now, I'm not qualified to tell you about them, but I would like to mention one. There is one plan that they have which seems to me very exciting, and that is the plan to build the Great White City. And I'd like to show you a photograph of it. This is the model of the city which will be built here in London one day, housing all television under one roof. And on July 14th, the BBC TV is going to carry on broadcasts back and forth between England and Paris. There are great things afoot. Now, I've seen very fine dramatic programs. Last night I saw a perfectly wonderful ballet for an hour and a half on BBC TV. But I would like to show you very briefly 2 or 3 shots for some outside broadcasts in which I'm sure we'll all be interested because we all like sports. All too briefly, we have told you the story of television in Great Britain. As you know, this program tonight is being transcribed on film, and tomorrow will be flown back to the United States, where it will be shown to the viewers of the Johns Hopkins Science Review over the DuMont network. I hope you'll be with us for another program. Our second program is going to come remote from the Royal Society, which is situated near Piccadilly Circus. Will you be with us then? We hope you will. And I'd like to bid you good night and thanks for being with us.
The program was devised and produced by Andrew Miller Jones.